Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Chivalry Yo podcast. My name is Sir Roland DeGray in the Society for Creative Anachronisms, and tonight with me I have Sir Thomas Winterbourne de Kent, a friend, mentor, and all-around good guy. He's going to be my first guest. For those of you who don't know, he was my knight, or rather, he is my knight, and we have had many conversations over the years that go into the more, I guess, important aspects of understanding what our role is as members of the chivalry or potential members of the chivalry. Uh, as part of my training to be a knight, I was very fortunate to have such a man involved in my upbringing. So I'd like to say thank you, Sir Thomas, for joining us tonight.
Well, right on, and thanks for inviting me. This will be a different experience. I've never actually done anything like a podcast or anything like that.
It's a new experience for me too. Who knows? I may call you in a couple of days and tell you that it all was ruined for some reason. But ultimately, my aim here is to have long format conversations. Just to be fair to everybody, I plan on whoever I interview getting the questions in advance so they have time to kind of think about it, and then letting things kind of flow as they go. You know, we may get to all the questions, we may not. We may get off on one of these, and it may lead into something else kind of organically. I'm not trying to put any limits on it, but I do think that it's good to frame conversations with letting people know what's going on ahead of time. So Thomas has received the questions prior to us doing this tonight, and I think we'll just get started with the first one.
All right. Well, you did send me the questions, and I certainly did look at them briefly for a moment. I don't have a copy of them in front of me, so it's good.
No worries. I'm definitely gonna ask them.
Okay, good. Well, lay it on me, man.
All right, so I think it's appropriate to begin all of these with just some quick biographical information, a little bit of background on you. How long have you been playing? Where did you start? That sort of thing. So let's start with that. How long, as of this year, have you been playing the SCA?
Oh, so I guess the first time I ever saw the SCAs when I was a senior in high school, and one of my buddies, his parents had this. This is before the internet, really, right? So they'd heard from via the grapevine that there were these guys out, and there was some sort of medieval tournament out at the park in Clovis, New Mexico. It's in the eastern part of New Mexico, pretty close to Texas. And so me and my buddy and his parents, and we drove out to the park there in Clovis, and sure enough, there were guys out there in armor, and they were swinging sticks at each other. And being a young man, senior in high school, I was mightily impressed by that. And I thought that was really, and this was what, 86, I guess, 1986. I'm guessing, I think. I graduated in 86 from high school, so
yeah,
I was a senior, so we'll call that 86. And then for the next year or so, we talked about it, but it really wasn't until probably, I was in college, first year of college, second year of college, 88, somewhere around there, that I really kind of bit into it. And we started a local group there in Portales, New Mexico, which is the little town over by Clovis where I grew up. And I've been playing pretty good since then. So I went to my first Estrella in either 90 or 91. And you know, there are occasions where you take a little break, but pretty much for the most part, the SCA has been something that I do since then. So however many years that is, I don't know, about 30 years, something like that.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. So started down in what is now called Blackwater Keep, but it was Scorpion's Hollow at the time, I believe.
Yeah, Scorpion's Hollow. Yeah.
I just a quick aside, I had a wonderful opportunity very early in my path to chivalry to accompany Sir Thomas down to a little event called the War of the Stake Plains down in down in Clovis at Ned Holt Park. It was quite the experience. Lovely people out there, Blackwater Keep.
Yeah, they're lovely people, and I'm glad that, you know, for a long time there, I thought that group was was kind of gone and died on the vine a little bit. There's only 1 or 2 people playing, and so in the last few years I've gotten more active, and so I really try to support them because that's where I come from. And so as you know, because you've gone with me a couple times, when they have a thing, we tend to go support the thing.
And they always treat us real well out there. So now that that's a little bit of background of where you're coming from, just to go over a little bit about what I know about you in terms of your experience here. You are a knight, of course. Knighted 2000?
Oh no, 2000
or 5.
2006. I think 2006.
2006. Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense actually. Now that I'm thinking about that, right? And then and you were made a Pelican a couple years ago now.
Yeah. Fairly recently. Yeah.
Yeah. And just pretty well experienced. You've lived in a couple of different spots in our kingdom: Alberon, Drigistan, Blackwater Keep, all in the south, of course, but done some things around that in those areas. So I think that you draw a pretty good experience from all of that, a good wide and varied experience. So the first question is pretty broad in general, but it kind of goes along with the main theme of the show, which is what is the role of the Order of Chivalry in the current Middle Ages, according to Sir Thomas?
Oh dear. That's right. This was a question. No, the role of the chivalry. Well, so when I was a young guy, when I was first starting playing, I like to fight, and I like to go sit around the fires and drink homemade alcohol. Most of it probably pretty bad. Now that I think about it, and maybe watch some of the dancing and participate in that way. And that was for the first several years of my SCA experience. That was my primary participation. I was just in there doing the thing and having a good time. And actually, there's nothing wrong with that. And I've told people before, if you want to go, if that's what you want to do in the SCA, that is totally cool. If you just want to sit around a fire, or whatever it is you want to do, you can invest as much into the SCA as you want to. There can be a little more, especially when you start talking about ideas like chivalry. About the SCA. So the SCA is a pretty strange cat, really. I mean, looking back on it, the SCA, knights in shining armor, but really it's, if you look at medieval knighthood, the SCA is really sort of a distorted version of the Victorian idea of knighthood, which was a distorted version of actual knighthood. In the Middle Ages, it could be pretty brutal sometimes. But the Victorians had this idea. They had this sort of grandiose, this idea of chivalry, of the knightly virtues, defending the weak and the helpless, and that sort of thing. And that sort of did I lose you, Roland?
No, I accidentally took off my camera, but it's back on now.
Oh, okay. That's fine. You'll just edit all this out anyway, I'm sure.
For sure.
But the SCA, we use the term a dream, and it is kind of a dream, and it's kind of a fanciful dream. This idea of, and we use these words that honestly in today's culture are almost used kind of tongue in cheek. Words like honor, courtesy, chivalry itself. And you hear it framed as a dream sometimes. It's a dream of maybe not even what was, but maybe what could have been, maybe what should be, and knights are a part of that. The idea of chivalry and the idea of knighthood is a part of that. And my take on the modern chivalry in the SCA, in the society, is that it's sort of the gatekeepers of that a little bit. The caretakers of the dream. I don't mean to sound too grandiose, but it can be a dream, and there can be a lot more to it. There can be a lot more to the SCA than just sitting around a fire and drinking beer with your friends. Although that's certainly a nice thing to do too. But and I think it's important for knights to support the idea of chivalry in the SCA, because I think arguably we're probably the visible of the peerages. Were the guys in the belts and the chains, and we're out on the fields, and it's probably easier to spot a knight than a laurel or a pelican or master of defense. Maybe not so much with the master of defense, but I think as a knight, we really have to take care of the idea of the SCA and what chivalry is, because I think it's important. And that's, it's just me. Like I said, you can do whatever you want in the SCA, but there is a philosophical basis to some of it that's not invalid, and it's not without merit. So,
yeah, I would agree. I think that the more that I've played over the years, the more that has become of interest to me, the more research I've done into it. So that really actually marries and segues right into my next question, which is, where is it that you derive your concepts of chivalry from? Were there people along the way? I'm sure there must have been. For those who don't know, you were not formally squired to anybody, but there are some. You've definitely talked about mentors and people that have guided you along the path. But also, were there period sources that you looked up, read about, indulged in, tried to gain a better perspective? Is that something you continue to do?
So the period sources that I've looked at about knighthood, honestly, are period sources that I've looked at since I was knighted. When I was a young guy, a fighter guy, honestly, I wasn't so much into the learning about actual knighthood and an actual study of medieval history in that kind of specific manner. Knights were the fighter guys. Knights were the fighter guys that usually beat up most of the other fighter guys. As a young man, that's it. And when I was young, when I was like, I don't know, 19, 20, and going to the local fire packs we have. And this guy came from Manstiora, and he walked in, he was a knight. And we were like, oh, he's a knight, and oh my goodness, we're going to get to fight a knight. And it was very exciting for us at the time, because where I lived, which is it was sort of in the middle of nowhere, right? I mean, we didn't have access to that very much. And I still remember looking at this guy standing on the field and having this urge to go test myself against that person. I mean, there's a lot of room in the SCA for different kinds of knights. I mean, there really is. I mean, if you want to be, you could be William Marshall. If you want to be that guy, the big sort of fist of the king, the greatest knight of Europe, the guy that's winning, that is fighting battles when he's 70, and the guy respected by everyone, and that strong kind of leader of the men. I mean, there's a place for that. If you want to be Lancelot, if you want to be the perfect knight, if you want to steep yourself in the ideas of chivalry and of virtues and how to be a better person and ways that you should act and not act, you can be that guy too, if you want to, or whatever mixture of the two that you want. Or you could look at different periods of time in different places and look at the different peoples and what was seen as a knight and what was because knights just started out as guys on horseback in chainmail.
Very true.
Right? It's a chivalry. It's mounted warriors. So that's in terms of I think I'm getting far afield of the question here. In terms of my idea of what a knight should be, that's actually been kind of organic. That's sort of developed as I've gone along in the SCA. I didn't really have a good idea. I watched movies about King Arthur when I was a kid, the same as I also watched Conan the Barbarian too, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. So, but the ideas of knighthood and what you should do and what you shouldn't do has been, honestly, that's after you get knighted, that changes a lot, to be honest. And that's something that people who haven't undergone that, they hear that a lot. I heard that, but it's like when you tell your kid that's a mistake, you shouldn't do that, and the kid's like, yeah, just like you said when you were 16, and you don't really listen. But I do remember that after I was offered knighthood at Estrella that year, and I was walking around celebrating that night because I'd received an offer into chivalry, and there was another knight, Sir Gregor was his name, And he stopped me, and we had a drink together there in the dark. And he said, Thomas, I'll tell you this. Your game's going to change now. It's going to change a little bit. It's going to change in ways that you don't really understand yet in terms of what your SCA experience is. And he was right. But he's right in a way that you can't see until you do the thing, right? And so you could really try to explain this all you want, but really you just have to do the thing before you see the thing.
I think that's very true. I think since it's the anniversary of my knighting was earlier this month, 5 years, October 10th, and my perspective has changed tenfold on what I need to do as I'm obligated and as somebody who wants to legitimately leave the society better than he found it. I think there's part of it that can only be understood once you are actually in that role, and people will actually come to you expecting you to act a certain way, and that expectation is not there until you put on the chain and wear the belt. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. I mean, you could see a little bit. Well, at an early Estrella, I was up early in the morning, and I happened in I saw the crown, and he was walking, and there was another knight, and forgive me, I don't remember his name, and I don't even know if I knew him at the time. He had just arrived on site, and this was shortly after dawn. I don't know why. I happened to be walking by and see them, and I saw this other knight go up to the crown and Your Majesty, and they embraced. And then the knight in question took a knee, and he talked to the crown, and I had this inkling of this kind of relationship that could be, that I didn't have any kind of experience with, but even then, even early on, I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was a thing, and it was a little different. So
yeah, I think that's a good example. So this is one of my favorite questions. It's kind of crafted to you a little bit. I'm going to ask it of some other people too. But if we were going to write a book in the Outlands of knightly fables that we might then distribute to wayward squires to teach them lessons about what is good and right and just in the world, is there a story that you might be able to impart that teaches a lesson about any one of the virtues, knightly behavior, what to avoid, that sort of thing?
This is the one question that you sent me, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I don't. I was having a hard time coming up with something to say, some sort of story, and I thought, well, I could talk about this, or I could talk about the other thing. As the years go by in the SCA, what you find out is it's almost like there are certain kind of bright memories, that you just remember. And it turns out that this was a cool thing, even though you didn't know at the time it was a cool thing. Later on, you realize it was a cool thing. And there's the more you play and the more you engage in the SCA, the more of those things can happen. In terms of a story, so I thought I would go back to Estrella. Estrella is my favorite war. It's just the war I would always go to. And I was there. This was before I was knighted, and there were two young ladies also in armor for the first time. Well, it's their first war. They've been in armor before, but they were nervous about it. They were going to fight with spears, and they were in armor, and they both had spears, and their spears hadn't been checked yet, because all the weapons have to be checked, of course. And so I offered to go to the field with them. I walked them up to the field, which was a ways away from the main camp, and to check their weapon. And there were a few guys from the Outlands there, right? And you could see the other army sort of gathering on the other side, the force of Aidenveld, and I don't know how many, several hundred people, I guess.
Right.
It was a lot. And afterwards, I learned that there'd been a deal. And that was the deal. The deal was, you have to be on time. We're going to start the war. We're going to start the battle at 10 o'clock sharp. And the hordes are going to go at 10 o'clock sharp. And whoever's on the field at 10 o'clock sharp, that's when we're starting. So here I am, and these girls have their inspected, and we're just waiting for the army. And I look down on the road, and I see here comes the big Outlands army, and all the horns and the drums, and everyone dressed in green. And here's the crown leading it, and here they come. Here's our guys, and the horns go off. and the horns go off when the Outland's army is still a long ways away. And so here I am with just a handful of other people. There's about 12 of us or so, and that was it. Against I don't know. I don't know the numbers. Could be 400, 500.
At that time, it wouldn't be surprised. Yeah,
It was. Those are big wars back then. So so it seemed weird, but we made a little group and we marched up to the Aitenveldt. And I remember there's this guy on the side, and he said, "Huh, I'm going to flank." And he goes to run away. I was like, "Where are you going?" He's a flanking. He's a flanking unit. And afterwards. Someone wrote a poem about it, "The Stand of the 12," and it was very epic. It was very epic, right? And bodies flying everywhere as we stood our ground, and everyone died, and until at last, in a sea of bodies, we were pulled down. I don't remember it being like that. I'll be honest with you. I was there, and I remember getting run over by a 50-man unit from Aitenveldt, and I remember hearing some guy above saying, "Where's their army? This can't be their army. Their army's not here." Of course, because once they started the scenario, they stopped everyone. They wouldn't let anyone else come on the field. So at the time, I remember thinking, this was silly. This was a silly thing. Oh my goodness, what's going on here? But it's a thing that's stuck with me. And I guess what I get from that is, if you're in the SCA, there will be things, and you might not realize at the time that you're in a moment. You might not realize at the time that this is a thing that you're going to remember when you're old, and whatever that is, whether it's someone embracing when the sun comes up, whether it's standing there with 2 new fighters while we all got slaughtered, whether it's, washing someone's feet just before dawn, or standing on a field at the end of a day, or watching someone dance around a fire. Those moments, the essay is full of those moments. And I think probably most of the time you don't realize it's a moment until later. But it is a moment. So
I love that story. The person who wrote the poem was Sir Lavin. It's a skald.
Was he really? Okay.
Oh, it's good. And if you haven't heard it, you should.
It's good. Well, it's been years. It's been a long time ago.
And that story is a good one. And one of the lessons I drew from that is that, oftentimes in the SCA things don't go as planned. And that was a big one. That's a well-known event that happened. And you guys stood there anyway.
We didn't, what are you going to do? Leave? I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, but I mean, you could have. I mean, the thing is the Outlands was represented by some very brave souls, I think, in my mind. And though it happened to you and it was very different perspective, the fact that it gets handed down in the lore of what we do becomes these kind of shining moments of, like you say, that can be turned into epic moments when the right language is provided and applied. And I think that's exactly what Sir Lavin did with his poem. And when people hear that, it may not be exactly how you recall it, but I think it's definitely got its merit in the greater oral history of our kingdom. So,
all right, I'm gonna stop you just there, rolling.
All right, Sir Thomas. So next question. Again, if we were writing another book, this time a history book of the Outlands, a little bit more factual account of knightly deeds, perhaps a great book of the chivalry. What moment would you contribute as your proudest achievement or exploit?
Okay, yeah, I remember reading this question, and honestly, the answer was just kind of right there. So like I was just mentioning that there's a lot of things that happen in the SCA, and sometimes, and I look back and there's those times where maybe you had a good day on the field and you won a tournament, or you had a good day fighting, or you did a cool thing, or you got an award, or there's a lot of different things here. But after thinking about it for just a short amount of time, so I'm in my 50s now, right? And I've still got a few years of fighting left, and I've got some stuff left, but there comes a time when you become less active. there becomes a time when you can do less. You don't travel as much, and there's all these young guys that are coming up, and you train the young guys, and because you want to replace yourself. I mentioned earlier that the idea of the SCA, the dream of the SCA, to me has importance, and I don't want that to be gone when I'm gone, So I want that to continue on. As the people that are older now who taught me, I'd like to think that I taught people that are younger than me, and that when I'm finished with everything, that they'll still be there, and they'll be teaching people younger than them, and that's how one thing gets passed down, and that's how things go through time. And so, not to put too fine a point on it, and but I'm proud of my squires. I'm proud of the men they are, and I feel, and they're very different kinds of knights. And I feel really comfortable in that if I were to go away today, if I were to stop playing today, if no one were to see Thomas again, my words are still in a way kind of out there, and they're getting passed down, and the things that need to be done to keep the thing that I think is important going are going to be done. And that feels really good to me, to be honest. So that's one thing I'm proud about.
You hit me in the fields there, Thomas. Right in the fields.
Well,
well, for sure. I'm certainly am proud to be a part of your lineage. To have a lineage founded by someone is kind of a unique thing in these days and times. It doesn't happen very much. Happened a lot in the early days of the SCA, but you were well into like you said, the 2000s by the time you got knighted. So to have it happen, that you founded a knightly household and have had multiple squires be knighted already is kind of a really cool thing. And it's a cool history to be a part of. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is to get some of those stories and some of that perspective recorded, because I want to be able to pass it on to other people too. I think that, the one thing that we can take away from this pandemic that is positive is that a lot of people are starting to turn to digital means of communicating, and it's so easy to hit the record button. And history, when the tools are used properly, history can be better accounted for. And
well, we look at that, and you tend to think, we think about the good old days. I remember back in the good old days, back in the days of yore, the good old days back then. And we sort of, glorify the good old days a little bit, and that's fine. But then you realize today is someone's good old days. I mean, when I think back when I was a very young man, all the experiences I had, all the things I did, well, there are very young people out there right now that are having those same kinds of experiences, or they will once we start playing again. And this is their good old days. And so, I think that's not a bad thing.
I agree. That's a good way to put it. Well said. Next one. What is your list of knightly virtues? And I have a follow-up after, but we'll start with what is your list? What are the knightly virtues you gave me?
So this is a conversation. This is one of those things that before you're a knight, you don't realize people have these conversations, right? Well, what's a virtue? What's not a virtue? What does this mean? What is honor? What is and so, and I think that's fine. If you look historically, I mean, seven deadly sins. That's it. That's locked. We all know what those are. Envy, greed, gluttony, sloth, lust, anger, pride. And but the virtues, if you look at from historical sources, there are guys that wrote down the knightly virtues. These are the 4 virtues of knighthood. These are the 12 virtues of knighthood. These are the 11 virtues of knighthood. Just so there was some disagreement even in period about what the heck a virtue of knighthood is really. I guess honor, mercy, prowess, courage, faith, courtesy, franchise.
Remember them well. Sir Thomas made each one of our belts very custom to us when he made our squire belts, and mine was inscribed with all 7 of the virtues that he just listed. And I know which one that I hold in high regard. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second. But outside of prowess, because you and I are in agreement that prowess is the gatekeeper virtue for our order. One must have prowess in any order of peerage in order to gain admission into that peerage. So we're going to assume that if you're being talked about or if you're being considered, prowess is probably not your problem in general. What other virtue outside of prowess do you hold in the highest regard?
So, I mean, I think they're all important because otherwise they wouldn't be on my list, right?
Sure.
And my list isn't the same as maybe everyone's list. There's some differences there. But I have to say, just from a philosophical point of view, it's got to be faith. It's got to be faith, and I'm not talking about like religious faith. There's a tie-in with knighthood and the idea of religion, and the early church and that sort of thing. But I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm talking about prowess allows you to do something. Courage lets you stand. The courtesy and honor, how we comport ourselves and how we deal with other people. But when I think of faith, faith in the idea that honestly that there is good and that there is bad. Faith is sort of the cornerstone. It's the assumption that there are better ways to be than others, and it's the assumption that there are better ways to act than others, and it's the assumption that one person standing, even if he's not successful, even if he can't win, one person standing, how whatever that standing looks like, is sometimes the right thing to do, even if it's not the very smart thing to do. And that one person standing, one person having faith that they're doing the right thing, that this is where they need to be and this is what they should be doing because it's the good and proper thing to do, can change the world. I believe it. I think faith is important. We have to have faith in what is right, and whatever that is, because that's a whole different conversation, right?
For sure.
But yeah,
absolutely, very good. Yeah, I like that answer. When asked the same question, I often tout that mercy is the one that I focus on a lot. I feel like the world needs more of it. I feel like our capacity for mercy has been diminished over time. And when people fly off the handle, when people do things that they later regret, when people do things that they knew were wrong in the moment, to provide justice, one must be merciful. It is not about granting someone revenge. It's not about getting that person. It's about finding something that's equitable and something that can restore what is right for everyone involved. So mercy is integral to that. And my comings and goings with people in the SCA, there are folks that have frustrated me. And I think anybody would say that. Yeah, it's a volunteer organization. It's a nonprofit. You're going to have folks that don't agree with how you play or what you do, and they may vocalize it in a way that annoys you. But it kind of goes back to what you said earlier in the podcast, which is there's all kinds of ways to play. And this group took a stance very early on, I think, that we're going to take all comers and we're going to make people feel welcome. And if you're going to really do that, if you enshrine that in your heart, if you're actually going to be hospitable, you got to forgive some people their faults, especially if they're not really hurting anybody. Being annoying is not a sin.
I hope not.
Being difficult, not a sin. And I hope not either, certainly for my own sake. But I think mercy is something that I try to enshrine in my heart, because I think that rolls into the next question, which is vices. Which vice do you struggle with the most?
Oh, goodness. So You know, when I during my vigil when I was knighted, there I was in a tent, middle of the night, and this guy comes in and he sits down in front of me and he says he's a priest and he wants to talk to me and he wants to talk to me about sin. He wants to talk to me about, and I'm not a particularly religious guy, right? But he wants to talk about, what he asked basically that very question. What do I think that I could work on there? And at the time I was completely flummoxed. And I was like, it's not an appropriate question. Who is this guy? And I was like, well, what is this? But I will say that afterwards, it does cause you to ponder that a little bit, to think about it, because I am more keenly aware than anyone, even my wife, of my many and varied faults, because we are hopefully more aware of our own faults than other people are. Do you know, I think it's a thing that changes over time. I mean, if you were to couch it in the deadly sins, if I look back and see what did I, oh boy, that the lust was an issue, that was a problem. Gluttony was a problem. I don't think, I think probably, well, not a problem, but certainly a little point there. I was like, well, that was maybe the wrong thing to do, but probably sloth as I get older. Okay. To be honest, as I get older, I would think it's harder to go out and beat on the pedal. It's harder to put your armor on. It's harder to well, it's hard to go to the park right now anyway, right? But it becomes more of a deal, and it becomes easier to sit in my living room and watch a movie instead, or just to not do the things that I need to do. And to be honest, I don't have any active squires right now. So one thing about having a squire is if you're doing it right, in my opinion, you have to play a lot. You have to be engaged. That's what you have to do. If you're putting this guy on or this lady or whoever on the path and you're guiding them, well, you gotta get them to events. You have to go to fighter practice. You have to train with them. You have to. There's a lot that needs to be done. There are conversations that need to happen, right? And so that's a kind of engagement that having an active student gets you.
Yeah.
And so I think, especially since we've stopped having face-to-face meetings here, I feel like I'm just pretty slothful lately, to be honest.
That's
and
fair.
I think that's as authentic of an answer as I think I can give you at this time.
I feel like that's fair. I've struggled with that one myself. When this first all kind of kicked off, I really was hoping against hope that we'd get through it fast. And then about a month ago, I came to the realization that was out the window. It's been 6 months. It's not going to go away fast. So, I've been trying to engage a little bit more with the populace of the barony, mainly just because I miss them and I miss my people. And I think that people that play this game can relate, that we all have our people in the SCA. It's our chosen family. And the fact that I'm able to do this with you, even though it's not exactly the same, is certainly better than sitting in my house trying to hope that something will get better that I have no control over.
Well, I think you're doing a good job. I mean, and that sort of is your job, in my opinion, right now. Part of your job as being a leader in the area that you're in, is to keep your fingers in it. And we can't play the SCA right now in a way that we used to, or in a way that we would like to, right? But that doesn't mean we can't do anything. So until better days come, we'll just keep doing what we do. And I totally get what you mean about the people. And I've the fighting's fun. The social aspect is fun. The pomp and the ceremony of courts is fun. It's doing pure stuff is satisfying. The service is satisfying. Singing around a fire is satisfying. All this, but really, fundamentally, the thing that keeps you in the SCA, you, the general, you, me, I guess I should say, the thing that will keep me coming back is exactly the people. It's the people. When the fighting goes away, when all that other stuff goes, there are people that I know and love, and I've known and loved for years, and that's the thing that's going to keep me coming back. So yeah, that is totally important.
Yeah, well said. Only a few more questions on our list here, but let's roll to the next one. It says, are the expectations of those on the path to chivalry reasonable? What advice might you give someone on the path who may be struggling? And let me elaborate on that a little bit. What I mean is that we've got some pretty basic expectations as an order in this kingdom. I think that you have to demonstrate leadership capability. You have to teach. You have to travel. You have to have prowess. Are those things laid out clearly, in your opinion, across the kingdom? And then, of course, the follow up was, what advice? If you could give me a little bit of golden advice from Uncle Thomas, that'd be great.
So I was I took kind of the long path to knighthood. It was 20 years before I got knighted. And part of that was 10 years before I got an AOA, actually. I think because of where I lived, because I was kind of away, and everyone just assumes that you have that sort of thing anyway. And I wasn't knighted until I came to Oberon. Mm-hmm. And I started taking positions in court and doing the heraldic stuff and fighting in the tournaments and seeing the guys there. It can be really frustrating if you have a young guy. And there was a part of me that always says, I don't want to do this. People think I'm just going to do this just because I want to be knighted. I don't want to do that. Or I'm not going to be this because people will think I'm doing this just because I want to be knighted. And when I was young, on the other side of it, that seemed reasonable to me. I didn't want people to think I was doing this just so I could receive the accolade of knighthood in the SCA. Now on the other side of it, holy cow, yeah, do that. Fight in the tournaments. And it's okay to say I'm on the path of knight. I want to be a knight in the SCA. I want to be a knight in the SCA, and you tell me what I need to do to be a knight, and I will work on that. Do you want me to do service? You want me to be on the Queen's Guard? You want me to sing a song around the fire? What does a knight in the SCA look like? And I'll figure that out because I want to be a knight. And then if you are ever knighted, then you realize that your perception was not the best, right? And you were wrong about a few things. There's another knight I know. His name is Sir Bohemian. And I remember when I was young, before I was knighted, and we would have conversations, and we were talking about knighthood, and he would say, you want to know what to do to be a knight? Here's what you do. You think of a knight, and here's a knight. So we're going to get a picture of a perfect knight, our perfect knight. How does he fight? How does he look? How does he act? What does he do? He's the perfect knight. And we're going to build this picture and then, be that guy. And it seemed really simple. I was like, oh, well, that's all you have to do. It's simple to say. It's not so easy to do all the time. The path to knighthood can be frustrating. It can be frustrating because, to be honest, there's a fairly subjective element to it. There's an element of luck to it. You happen to be at a certain place at a certain time, seen by a certain guy doing a certain thing. There are good and fine and knightly people, and a lot of them who will never be knighted because no one knows, right? And it's simply because they don't have the opportunities to show that about themselves. I would advise, I wasn't squired to anyone. I would advise someone, if they were serious about it, squire to someone. Find someone that you resonate with, find someone that you like. And because that relationship is helpful. Because as a knight with squires, let's go to the event, squire. Let's do this. Let's work on this. We're going to work on this today. You're going to learn how to fight with a spear today. We're going to do this. This is the bard. You got to have at least one song at Bardic. That's it. We're going to do this. Have you thought about being on the Queen's Guard, squire? You should do that. Hey, I'm going to introduce you to Count so-and-so or Duke so-and-so or Sir so-and-so. Go fight them now and fight them a lot. I mean, that's an element of being a knight to a squire. That's an element of mentorship, right? Yeah. And so I guess my big advice to people who seek that in the SCA is it's okay to say, I want to be a knight. What do I need to do? and then go do that, right? And that would be the advice I would give you.
Fantastic. I think we're very fortunate in that. I would say more often than not, that's the attitude of most knights, at least in our kingdom, that, declaring your intent and really going after it is something that is looked on positively. I don't know if that's necessarily the case with all paths to peerage. Um,
And I can't really speak to, I've been a Pelican for a couple of years, and I'll be honest with you, I'm still kind of figuring out that. And in the Laurel Circle, I have no idea what they talk about. I mean,
it's a mystery.
Circle of Chivalry, I know what we talk about here. There's a bit of interkingdom anthropology, I mean, so it's going to be different here than it is off in Florida or in California or a place far away. There's going to be some differences, but I have a pretty good take about here in the Outlands, in Colorado and New Mexico and Wyoming, that I know what we look at, and I know what we like to see, and I know what we want to see when we talk about perhaps new members of the order, right? Because sometimes it's not an easy question. I mean, you get these. So here's this guy. What about this guy? What about this guy who's awesome, who's chivalrous and virtuous in every single way, and he's like the perfect knight, and everyone likes him, and he's just the perfect guy, and he has all these peer-like qualities, but he doesn't fight well.
Yeah.
So there's that guy. Or what about this guy who, frankly, can beat us all up all the time, right? This guy who's just awesome. He's a natural athlete. He's a natural fighter, but maybe, I don't know, man, he's still wearing carpet for armor. So what do we do with that guy? Or he's not interested in engaging in any other aspect of the SC other than that fighting field. I mean, so that's a question too. It can be, sometimes it's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as you know, we sit in a circle and I will like guy A. I think he's awesome. I think he's ready. And maybe you won't like guy A. Maybe you don't think he's awesome. I think this person's a good fighter. You might disagree. You might think this person's very chivalrous, and I might have some issues with that, and that's why it's a circle. And that's why we have those conversations. And of course, here in the Outlands, culturally, in the SCA, at the end of the day, it's up to the crown. So they'll hear our input, and then they'll make that decision.
I think the only thing that frustrates me and I think this would frustrate anybody, is if somebody speaks from a place of ignorance too often, particularly if we've got somebody that is continually brought up and the same people don't know who we're talking about. I think that's frustrating. I think that I think something that you instilled in me, and whether you did it intentionally or not, was a stewardship for the order. It is contingent upon us as members of that order to try to help worthy candidates get into that order. We want to, like you say, replace yourself, but we want to replace ourselves with people that we know that can do the work that we need to do.
And because of that, the standards have to be, in my opinion, I mean, some of the standards have to be kind of high.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's easy to start sliding. I mean, what about this fighter? This fighter who's a great guy, but he doesn't fight well. Well, then then maybe he shouldn't be knighted. Are this guy who fights very well, but he doesn't have the franchise of a knight, and he doesn't have the service of a knight, and maybe he shouldn't be knighted. Because it is important, because we add to our order, and the people we add to our order become part of the definition of the order.
Yeah.
Now, I will say this. I think if I were knighted and I didn't think my fighting was up to snuff, well, now it's incumbent upon me to fix that. I mean, if I was knighted and I never did service, well, now I need to do service.
Yes.
If I was knighted and I was lacking in some area, okay. Well, once you're knighted, you're knighted. You're a knight in the SCA, right? But then you got to fix whatever it is that you need to fix to become the kind of the knight that will support the order, right?
I agree. I think that I would take it a little bit further. I as an act of mercy, if you will, I think it's very important for other knights who, particularly if you have a relationship with a person that you just described, a person that doesn't quite make the mark somewhere. I think it's good and right to help that person any way you can. I think ultimately the responsibility is theirs. Yes, I would agree with that. But I think that we all have struggles. We all have things that we're dealing with, and sometimes a friendly word or a helpful hint or just listening to a guy can help get them where they need to be to make that kind of change.
Sure, because it's not them anymore, right? They're actually part of us now. He or she is part of us, and so that's to benefit that person is to benefit the order, right? And then all of us. And again, to go back to this idea of the dream and the idea and what does it mean to be a knight in the SCA? And culturally, that's going to change over time anyway. When I was young, the expectation was you. I believe the expectation was you had to travel a lot more than I think you do today. And that was just, you got to go up to Wyoming. You got to go up to Colorado. You got to go down to El Paso. You have to, the breadth of the kingdom, that was sort of the expectation. I don't know if it's quite like that anymore, to be honest, in terms of that being a thing that has to happen before you're knighted. So our ideas of what needs to be, or what you need to have or need to be able to do to become a knight in the society, it's not set in stone. Even the ideas of prowess and as you know, you got to be able to fight in the SCA if you're going to be a knight. But lately, over the past decade or so, I guess there's been what about battlefield prowess? What about the guy that doesn't win any tournaments, but he stands on the field with a spear and he kills like 20 guys?
Leads men.
What our leads men, or leads his own guys? What about a leader of men? I mean, there's definitely some room for some flexibility in determining or defining what it means to be a knight, and I think that's just culture.
I think you're right. I think that it's good to have an active conversation and an ongoing conversation of what that means. I think it benefits everybody to get those things discussed. I think when we isolate ourselves is where we run into problems. I think as long as it's an active conversation, we can begin to see each other's point of view a little bit clearer, and that helps me when I'm contemplating how I feel about a potential candidate and what advice I'm going to give the crown. Is what is this candidate doing in the context of now, and what are we really expecting of him now? And I think that conversation is healthy and has to happen, or we get into a situation where we're holding people to a standard that is no longer really there.
Well, and it could be frustrating. I mean, if you're that person and if you're on the path of knighthood in the SCA, it can be incredibly frustrating. I can't even imagine right now. All those guys that were on the short list, all those guys that knew they were being talked about, and now we're not even playing, we're not even fighting, right? So everything's kind of stopped. But even before that, there's that feeling that, oh, they're talking about me, what's going on, and then if you're not offered knighthood, there starts to be this sort of creeping sort of, well, what the heck's wrong with me then? What's going on? And I've seen guys become kind of negative about that, and I think. Part of that's because, not all the time, but a lot of times they don't have a guy there to mentor them, to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. This is what we need to work on, right? And I'm not talking about taking things out of circle. I'm not talking about saying, well, sir, so-and-so said that, you were a jerk because of this or that or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. But that, again, we go back to the knight-squire relationship. You go back to the squires and say, let's work on our tourney fighting, or well, let's get you a new tabard, or maybe let's travel to some of these events, or here's Duke so-and-so. You need to go fight him because he doesn't know you and he should know you, right? And so but without that kind of mentorship, without that kind of guiding, a lot of times the candidates are just sort of in a place where they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
And it could be incredibly frustrating for them.
As you mentioned before, every crown has their reason for doing what they do. And in this kingdom, we accept that. So, it would be impossible for us to expect consistency when every king and queen gets to do what they want.
Sure. And there's some pretty different cats there with the crowns.
Absolutely.
So I've been in circles before where the crown says, listen, I know here's this guy, here's so and so. I'm going to be honest. I don't like this person. I don't think this person is knightly, and we're not going to talk about this person during my reign.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually kind of appreciate that approach. It saves time.
Yeah. So we don't have the same conversations every circle about the same people, so that's fine. That doesn't happen very often. I've only seen
No. I haven't experienced that much either, but I would say that when it does, I find that it's a solid take from a crown. I think it's a good choice to, if you're not going to do something, you help streamline that whole process.
Well, and it can be different. Like you said, prowess is the gatekeeper, right? And prowess is a big question. And prowess is sort of stylistic too. I mean, there's a certain skill set there. You have to be at a certain level, but it might be that you Roland maybe just beat me up every single time. And I beat up fighter A every single time. And fighter A beats you up every single time. And what does that even mean? I mean, in terms of prowess. And so I think fighter A doesn't have it. You think fighter A does. And so again, it can be kind of subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we both sat in circles where that was the prime topic. And that's what we were trying to figure out. I got a couple more, and then we'll wrap this sucker up.
All right.
Here's a tough one.
Okay, I'm ready.
Do you think we hold each other accountable within our order?
Sometimes. And that's very authentic for me. So sometimes I think we should hold each other accountable, but it gets fuzzy about what that means exactly. Holding each other accountable, what you should do and what you can do. And like I said, in a volunteer organization. And I think that if I had an issue with the person, or if I had a question, straight up, because I have in the past, and I would again, I just call them.
Yeah.
I call them and say, hey, this is what, this is the deal. And, this is what's going on. I just want to, and even if I'm not saying you're good or bad or whatever, but I'm saying this is what I heard and it's out there. And so now, if people were talking bad about me, I'd want to know if I stuck my foot in it somehow and I didn't realize it, or if I was being perceived as being in some way unchivalrous or unknightly, I would definitely want to know about that, right?
Yeah.
And so my assumption is that my brothers would want to know the same thing, and my sisters would want to know the same thing. So should we hold each other accountable? Well, yes, but like I said, it gets fuzzy. I mean, we're going to go, so I heard you were smoking pot in the woods. What's accountable to the standards of accountability are a little bit different, right? I mean, there's the things on the extremes that all of us are going to say, wow, this needs to be dealt with right now. But then there's kind of a gray area where some people might, well, that's offensive. Well, I don't think it's offensive. And so you have to be a little bit careful. I am aware that the way I see the world isn't the way everyone sees the world. And my ideas of what's right and wrong and good and bad aren't going to be everyone's ideas of right and wrong and good or bad. And it's certainly possible at the end of the day to say, hey, I disagree with you. And I don't think what you did was the best thing. But I've told you that. And I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a good person. I think we're just disagreeing. And I think that's not invalid. In fact, I think as a society, maybe we should work on that a little bit. It seems like it a little bit. But should we hold each other accountable? Yeah, who else is going to?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, who else is going to? So, yeah, it behooves us to hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah. I feel like there occasionally is cause to maybe have a conversation, an open and honest conversation as a group about some of these things. I think some have been attempted in the last couple of years. I think some people have been blown off about some stuff that are legitimate concerns. I don't want to get into it too heavily at this moment, but I really do believe that going forward, particularly in our kingdom, we're just going to need to be a little bit more comfortable with having some of those conversations and getting on the same page about what we think is acceptable behavior and what's not, and what's an acceptable reaction to bad behavior. I think the biggest thing we can do to help with that is follow our rule set when somebody breaks a rule. I think that some of the things that have happened in the past have upset other people simply because we let the crown deal with it when it's not really the crown's job to deal with it. You break a major rule in the SCA, there's actual rules for how to deal with that. And if the crown's going to sit in judgment at a curia, potentially, they can't be the prosecutor. You know what I'm saying? If they can't be the one that investigates and makes all the decisions. So, some of it's procedural, some of it's, I think, having a better understanding of what we all think is acceptable. I think there was a lot of us and them mentality in the 80s.
In the late 90s,
In the late 90s, yeah.
That there was by the time I got here. So
yeah, but I think that a lot of that's going away.
I hope so.
I think there's room for us to improve the way we do that, perhaps. And I think that's where I'll leave it at the moment.
Sure.
All right. Next question. What methods or habits do you employ to help maintain integrity in our order? What are some things that you do personally that maybe you go out of your way to do so that others can see and follow that example?
So here's, and it's going to sound simple, right? But if you want to be a knight, you got to act knightly. And that seems like I'm not trying to be too simplistic there. I'm not trying to make that a blow off answer. If you're going to be a knight, you have to be knightly, right? We're talking about franchise here. We're talking about how you comport yourself and how you look and what you do. If you're a knight, don't be wearing tennis shoes under the fighting field. What are you doing? When I was knighted, I threw away my dome tent. There's a certain set of expectations about how you should look and be if you're going to be a knight in the society. And there should be a certain amount of expectations, and they shouldn't be. They're not crazy, they're not unattainable, but honestly, we should be held to a higher standard, in my opinion, about what you can do and what you can't do. There are things that maybe I would have done as a brown belted fighter that I won't do now today. I'm not going to do that simply because I'm a knight in the society for creative anachronisms, for whatever that means, right? In terms of what I like to do, I like to train. I like to help. I like working with the newer fighters, because I remember when I was a newer fighter, I remember people working with me. I remember going to the first event where I ever fought, which is, I think, a Penzic pity party or something. And I remember Sir Jochen and his son was Duke Johann, and so I'd never fought in an event before. I'd fought at some fighter practices, and they went and they borrowed some armor and they taped it onto me, blue plastic. It's crazy. And I stuck a helmet on me, and I fought my first tournament that day. And that wouldn't have happened if those guys hadn't been willing to say, "Hey, you new guy, come here. Let's hook you up. Welcome to the SCA. Here you go." Yeah. And so, it behooves me to do the same. I got to pass that along, right? We were talking about replacing yourself. Well, there's a lot of good guys out there. There are guys out there that are looking for us that don't even know they're looking for us yet. And maybe they never will. I don't know. But when we get those people, we should help them out, right? And in whatever ways they need to be helped.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. One of the ones I think that one of the things that you instilled in me, a conversation we had, I can't remember specifically what brought it up, but I remember you telling me that once you put that belt on and you put that chain on, you wear the spurs, there's some things you just can't ignore anymore.
Yeah.
You can't walk away from certain things that happen. Somebody's being accosted at a big war where normally, you might be a brown belt and you're walking down the alley and you're just going about your business. You don't get to do that as a knight. You have to stand and represent all those things that you said you would.
And we'd like to say, well, if you're going to be the good guy, you got to do the good thing anyway, because you should. And that's right. Honestly, you should. but there's an element of choice there. There's an element of like, well, I don't know, those are those guys, whatever. I'm out of this. I'm not a part of this. And it's different. I think it's different in people's perceptions. Like, here's this guy, he didn't want any part of that, so he left. Here's this guy, he was a knight and he just left. And it feels different, right? It feels like there's an assumption of you said to stand, and that's a pretty good word. I mean, there's some things you can't walk away from. You just can't, because you're a knight in the KSCA. Again, whatever that means, but you can't. Now you have to deal with it. And if you don't want to do that, you shouldn't have probably put on that belt in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. Sir Thomas, I want to say thank you. This has been a wonderful about hour and 15 minutes of conversation with you. It reminds me of the old days. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I really appreciate you being my first guest. I'm hoping to have many, many more.